Well, we just got our evidence that the Leafs, indeed, in reality, were a complete mess. In an absolute bomb of a piece released in The Athletic by Chris Johnston, James Myrtle, and Jonas Siegel, titled Inside the Stunning Fall of the Maple Leafs, Chaos, Dysfunction, and AI, they lay out a completely unorganized, confused, and unauthoritative front office. It talks about all these goodies, from Keith Pelley coming at the deadline, dropping in with the team with his notes from ChatGPT. It talks about Brad firing Marc Savard in the disagreement that followed with Craig Berube. It talks about him doing nothing at the start of the season, kind of begging for something to happen. And then, of course, the trade deadline, where he just came off as a clown. I know a lot of people are going to focus on Pelley, specifically what happened at the trade deadline and the cost cutting. When I take a step back and I look at this, there is only one thing that I take away from this article that has any relevancy. And that is that Brad Treliving was a complete mess of a general manager for this organization, and that we are so good to be done with him as much as we respect the man. I want to talk about that today, start of the year. Remember that? We always forget. So the Leafs started off slow. They did not start the season very, very strong at all, right? Remember, Anthony Stolarz called out the team. They had a pretty soft schedule and were 500 early on. It was clear at that point that the team needed something. That defensively, we weren't any good, and the guys we had brought in collectively to replace Marner weren't doing it. Brad just did nothing. Like, that's the takeaway here. He makes some inquiries around the league to see what he can do, and he came up short and just decided, you know what, I'm going to see what happens. Not on me. And you contrast that with what the Jays are going through right now, where the Jays have legitimate injuries and guys are coming back, but they're saying, you know what, no, I'm going to trade for Lennon Souza. I'm going to trade for Patrick Corbin. They may or may not be able to help, but we need to make moves. That's action. Brad had nothing. So, start of the year, Brad does nothing. Number 2, finally, Brad does something. He fires an assistant coach. Now, I don't know about you, but general managers don't fire assistant coaches in the middle of the season. This doesn't happen. But he needed someone to blame. So he fires Marc Savard and he says to Craig Berube, this is what the report says. He goes, meets with Craig and says, hey, we want Derek Lalonde to run the power play. And Craig Berube says, no, I don't think so. I think we're going to do it as committee. And Brad says, no, I think you're going to have Derek Lalonde do it. And there's kind of this tension between the two of them for the next little bit. Are you kidding me? You're the general manager, and you're going to permit, firstly, you're going to tell the head coach who to run the power play? If the head coach doesn't have any authority to do that, he shouldn't be the head coach. And I get it. I understand that sometimes general managers do pick assistant coaches, or at least the head coach doesn't have complete say. But once that guy is in the seat, the head coach tells who's going to run the power play, who's going to run the penalty kill, who's going to do what. If he can't do that, there's no authority. So for me, if Brad didn't have faith in Craig Berube, which he clearly didn't, he should have fired him. Again, though, we know why he didn't. He's not authoritative. And he knew that he'd have to go to Keith Pelley and say, hey, Keith, the guy I just hired a year ago, I want to let go. He's no good. Yeah, that's a lack of authority. The last thing I want to highlight on this was the deadline. So the deadline was a complete shit show. 1 hour before the deadline ends, he didn't have any offer on the table for Bobby McMann and Scott Laughton. He literally had to send out an email to every GM with a for sale sign on these guys with 1 hour left in the deadline. How on earth does that happen? How on earth did we get to that point? How incompetent do you have to be? No wonder we got fleeced for McMahon. No wonder. We literally traded him to a team that's not going to make the playoffs, barely going to finish ahead of us. Poor Bobby McMann, by the way. And yeah, we couldn't get a first round pick. It's a joke. It's an absolute joke. So I take all of those things. I take the inaction, I take the lack of authority, and I take the last minute scrambling. This guy didn't know what to do. He didn't. And we are better now that he's gone. Don't get me wrong. I don't have a ton of faith in Keith Pelley. I don't. And I'm concerned by some of the things that he's saying. I'm concerned by the lengths that he got involved at the deadline. But I also understand that in order to truly understand dysfunction, you have to see it. So I actually appreciate him in a way going there, seeing the complete shit show and saying, yeah, that was a shit show. What all of this means, though, is the guy he hires to lead hockey operations is going to be so incredibly important. They are going to be coming into an organization that is fragile. They are going to be coming into an organization where, like we just saw, people are going to challenge authority. So that person needs to have the hockey intuition to know how our team needs to be built and play. They need to have the authority to go to people around them and say, look, you're going to buy in or get out. And they're going to need to have the goodwill around the league to make those trades. And the truth is, there are very few of those people. If I'm Austin Matthews, I'm looking at this and saying, why the hell would I resign here? And that's not a good thing. So please, let's get someone in who knows what they're doing. My name is Aaron Arona, and this is The Morning Whistle.